Welcome to week 2 of BYO Beats. We are in segment 3, the guilty pleasure, with our guest Tyler Austin, and we're going to start with the beer. Dr. Tyler Austin, thank you. I call him Tyler though. Like he told me to when I first met him, so I'm still calling him Tyler. But honestly, me and Johnny have been students of Tyler. I feel like we haven't mentioned that yet. Well, at least in our eyes, we were students. We were all students at the time, technically.
Yes.
But Tyler was higher on the chain of command than we were. Well, let's put it that way. Yeah, we were marching band members, and Tyler was overseeing the marching band. I also played in one of Tyler's conducting recitals, and he conducted the large ensemble at Michigan State that I was in many times. When you were talking about, sorry, I know this doesn't really fit in this segment, but I feel like if I don't say it now, I'll forget. The most memorable performance I remember being part of with you was we were playing a Schwartner piece. And I don't know the full name of it because it was really long.
And the Mountains Rising Nowhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned how like you're like a sucker for just sounds in general. That's one of the most soundy type of pieces that I had played, especially at that point in my life.
Definitely.
We'll also get to some Messiaen in this week's episode, so stay tuned for the Acquired Tastes next. That he's very much a soundy type of guy. So,
yes.
But now we've got guilty pleasure.
We'll
start with the beer. So the original selection was a Pilsner. So me and Doss have Pilsners, but Tyler has something else, so we'll get to him in a second. I have from Gruner Brothers Brewing, out from Wyoming, the Retro Club Pilsner. This is actually the second beer of theirs that I've had on their show. I had the Fluffy Cow Hazy IPA in an earlier episode, so I've been impressed with their work so far, and I think it'll continue here. So, Doss, what do you have?
I have the Carlsberg Danish Pilsner. I've had it before. It's on the lighter side, I guess. I mean, it's. I was trying to find one that like literally said light Pilsner, but I mean, I feel like that's just in the eye of the beholder or the tongue of the drinker. I don't know. That's gross. Never mind. That's horrible.
And then Tyler, you said you got something totally different.
Yes, I'm terrible at following instructions. I'm a teacher, so I'm usually the one giving the instructions.
Right.
I'm out of practice. But I ended up getting a coffee stout from Aleworks, which is a brewery in Williamsburg, Virginia, right up the road, about like 45 minutes from here. And definitely also a guilty pleasure, albeit in the opposite end of the beer spectrum.
It is true. So this is your second stout of the night, then. Of the two, which do you? Well, I mean, I guess that's a silly question because the Guinness was your anthem, so you'd probably go Guinness over this one, or
I think so. I'd probably end up drinking more Guinness than this because this is like sweet and like I can't imagine myself having like more than one of these. You know, it's really heavy. It's good. It's really good. Like I really like it, but it would be like a have one and really enjoy it, you know?
Gotcha.
So then on the other side, guilty pleasure being a Pilsner, how does that fit in?
I think like because I would consider like a Pilsner, and maybe this is like totally just me not knowing enough about beer or whatever, but I feel like Pilsner is just sort of like lowbrow, you know? So I feel like if somebody was like, what beer do you really like? Then I would probably be a little bit embarrassed to be like, I like Pilsners, you know? Like, and I'm sure that there are really good Pilsners, you know? Like, I feel like a beer snob would be like, really? And I don't know, but maybe I'm totally wrong.
So you'd have two ends
entirely off base.
No, you'd have two ends of the spectrum with whichever kind of beer snob that you're talking to. The ones that hate Pilsners and the ones that only drink Pilsners.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't help but think of there's a character on Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yes, that's
Amy's
what I was
boyfriends
thinking.
who's like really into Pilsners, like too into Pilsners. That's a funny show.
Yep, and none of them know what to say to him
Yeah.
other than like, "Hey, try that new one, that new Pilsner out there." Then I think there's an episode they tried to drink it with him, and they were just like, "This is horrible." Or I don't know.
But,
Thank you for saying
Yeah,
that.
I don't
I
know.
was thinking of what show is that this guy is like, "I love Pilsners." Yeah. Okay.
I think maybe like one of my big fears in life is that I'm going to say something that inadvertently deeply offends someone, and I could have no context of that thing beforehand. And I feel like Pilsner falls into that category.
I get
So,
that fear. It's because I watch too much stand-up comedy, and that's what they talk. If they're ever not on stage, that's what they're talking about. Is like they're like, I didn't know that they were out there. How was I supposed to
sure.
not offend them? Like, but yeah, I don't think you have to worry about the Pilsner people being mad. Don't worry
All
about
right.
it.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think they're usually pretty self-aware.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. With that, of course, we're going to get to our ratings at the end of this segment. But first, we're going to talk music. So for the Guilty Pleasure selection, we're going to take a quick break and listen to it. If you're listening on Spotify, go ahead and check out our playlist. I'll go ahead and say that again. It's BYO Beats Podcast, the complete collection. You can find that on our link tree, on our Instagram at BYOBeats_podcast. It's right there in the bio. If you're watching on YouTube, you should see a link somewhere over here to click on and listen to it then. So we are listening to Two Birds by Regina Spektor. So we're going to listen to that and be right back.
Welcome back. You just heard Two Birds by Regina Spektor, the Guilty Pleasure song for Tyler. I feel like, so my initial question after hearing this was you were talking about how you were much more of a feel type person than a lyrics type person.
Mm-hmm.
I think this song is difficult to get away from the lyrics though. Is that, am I wrong in saying that, or are you locked into that piano eighth note?
No, I definitely think that this is probably an exception to the rule for
Gotcha.
me. Yeah, definitely a lyrics thing.
Yeah.
And I'd call it a guilty pleasure because it's like quirky, it's like kind of girly, music, really, like it's just not something that I feel like I would play if I wasn't with people that I trust,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
but it's music that I really love, and that I definitely go back to over and over, that whole album,
Well, thank you for trusting us enough to share that with us. That's awesome.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
It's a really cool listen. I like, not and kind of going off of everything you've said about being like into sounds. This is a really cool fusion where it's got like that driving piano and just kind of like a very basic, I don't even know what to call that backing, like just like the bass part of the sound.
Well, and the tuba, the tuba was
the
tuba thing.
But like it was a very unique listen, and I'm really struggling to find anything that's similar to it. So do you have do you find yourself seeking out songs that are like this, or is Regina Spektor kind of like a separate area?
I mean, I like all of Regina Spektor's music. She has an album called Songs that for a long time I couldn't find it. I think it is on Spotify now. But I would say that album for her is like particularly experimental. Like she uses a lot of extended techniques in her singing where she'll like do like glottal stops, or she'll repeat things really quickly over and over again, or she'll trill with her tongue like on certain words. And so like I think that she is very into sound, like especially like vocal sounds. But if you just listen to that entire album, it's kind of experimental, and it's obvious that like she's trying to do things that are sort of out from center. And I think that's just something I like about all of her music. Even her, probably her most famous song, what's it called? I think it's called Fidelity. And it was like on MTV, you know, in circa 2007, you know, so it like got to that level of public awareness. And even in that, she's like repeating certain syllables and going like you know, and like so even in her most mainstream stuff, there's always that like quirkiness that I remember my friends making fun of it when I was in high school, like listening to that song and being like, this song is so stupid. And I'm thinking like in my head, like, that's kind of cool. And I was like, yeah, it's so stupid, right? So, you know, like,
it's guilty pleasure, right?
yeah. Yeah. So just something I've always identified with.
Yeah.
Does it
Go
does it
ahead,
get
Dawson.
to, my bad. Does it get to like so is this is such a musician question. I hate it. But I also love it. Is this more of an Imogen Heap type vibe, or is it more of a Laurie Anderson type vibe?
I think I would put Regina Spektor more on like the Imogene Heap type vibe. Yeah. Like this is probably one of the more like close to center songs that I know from her. And this album is probably more close to center in general. But yeah, I mean, Imogene Heap, I think, is like one of those people that combines electronics and acoustic sounds really, really, really well.
Oh yeah. Sure.
And I think in contrast, that Regina Spektor uses acoustic sounds in very unexpected ways. But to equal sort of like I like that you had the reaction where I was like, I don't think we've heard anything on the show like this before. Like I think that would be a normal, typical reaction to her music.
But it's interesting too because it doesn't, like at first listen, it doesn't sound if you're just listening to it, right? There's nothing inherently off-putting, right? It's very pleasant to listen to. It's very uplifting and like that nice driving, energetic beat. But at the same time, you start to listen a little closer, and you're like, "Whoa, this is super, super unique."
Yeah,
so I really like that, and I'm gonna have to definitely check out some more of her stuff. I did have a kind of anthropology type question. You know, you mentioned having taken some of those classes. In the bio on Spotify, it mentioned how she emigrated out of the Soviet Union as a child. So, do you think that had any sort of impact on her creativity and her desire to make music like this?
I do know that she is classically trained in some regard. I think as a pianist primarily. So like she plays all of her own piano stuff, and the piano is a really big part of her whole output as a musician. And I'm sure that probably a part of that too is her using her voice in those sort of extended technique, like non-traditional sort of ways where she's seeking new sounds with her instrument in that way. But yeah, I think she's talked about that fairly extensively, how her early kind of concert music, classical training has influenced her pop music.
Cool.
I have another question about your running playlist. Because you said this was also on that playlist along with your anthem. When you were making the playlist, if you remember, I know that's a little while ago, but were you thinking of songs that you already knew and thought I should put this here, or were you listening to stuff and realized, oh, this is something that would fit and then learn to love those songs because it was part of that playlist?
Probably both. I mean, probably like I started with some stuff that I knew. I don't actually think that I knew this very much before this album. I had actually kind of avoided this album because I had heard that it was the most like traditionally poppy out of her music. And I kind of liked that most of what I knew about her music was kind of like weirder, like just, different. So, but then I probably, it pinged to me like, oh, since this is poppy, I wonder if it has anything on it since I already know this artist. But yeah, probably both, because
Okay.
there were definitely some things that I remember putting on there that I knew really, really well.
Sure.
And just like all of my life too, I had like some pop music and some concert music and, like a huge conglomeration.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got a question about your listening habits. We've often run into on this show people either tend to fall into one of two categories when it comes to consuming music. Do you primarily listen to albums front to back or playlists of a mix of a whole bunch of different stuff?
I would say I probably predominantly listen to concert music. So I more listen to like pieces. But the pieces might be multiple sections. So I generally, as a listener, when I commit to listening to something, I commit to listening to the whole thing. But it's not like I'm going to pick an album and say I'm going to listen to every piece or song on this.
Yeah.
Like
Got it. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
it's hard for me to put stuff on shuffle because like then I'll get like the middle part of something and that just bothers me. I'm like, whatever it is, I want to listen to the whole thing.
Right.
So
Yeah. They'll be on a Richard Strauss album and you'll get the 7th variation of Don Quixote and then all of Don Juan. Yeah, that wouldn't be great.
yes.
Cool. All right. Do you have anything else, Doss? For this,
I don't think so.
for two birds or pilsners? Otherwise, we'll get to ratings. Keep it moving.
I'm ready.
All right, yeah. So I had the Retro Club Pilsner from Gruner Brothers Brewing here in Wyoming. Really crisp. It's crisp. It's light. It's fresh. Most craft pilsners taste this way, but this does a good job of emulating the good things about domestics in the crushability factor. But it still has like a good flavor and it's not overwhelming. But it has like the texture of a craft beer, in that the texture of a domestic is usually going to be like more watery, but this still feels full bodied without tasting heavy, if that makes sense. I haven't had a ton of craft pilsners just because I usually, if I'm drinking craft beer, I want something more flavorful, but in the case of this show, this is a perfect fit, and I think I'm actually going to go, and this is a little bit high for a Pilsner, but I think I'm going to go with a 4.0. Really enjoying this one, yeah.
Johnny apparently is one of those guys that likes Pilsners.
I wouldn't say that, but yeah,
No.
this is a good one. I don't know if I've ever scored a Pilsner this high.
All right. So again, I'm drinking the Carlsberg Danish Pilsner. It's not bad, not super skunky. That's kind of what I want to avoid when I'm drinking a Pilsner. Almost all of them have a bit of skunk. This does have some, but it's a manageable amount. I'm going to go with a 3.5.
And then me being terrible at following my own advice with my coffee stout. Excellent. Love it. Probably a 4.5.
Wow, great.
Nice.
Sorry that I relegated both of you to
well, at least in doing so you had one of the better beers of the night. So
hey, we're only halfway there, so
true.
We got a lot of way to go. We're gonna rinse out our glasses, pour our next ones, be back at you for the acquired taste. Welcome welcome back to BYO Beats Podcast, your beer and music podcast. We are on to segment number 4, the acquired taste, just past halftime. For the beer, we're jumping right in. We've got the red ale as a selection. So this is actually the second Irish beer in nature. The first being Guinness.
In nature.
And this one, the red ale being Irish in nature. It's not like a requirement, right? Like Guinness comes from Ireland.
Why are you saying in nature?
Because like a red ale doesn't have to be from Ireland.
Okay,
But the
I
style
understand.
kind of originated there, if that makes sense. So that's what I'm saying in nature.
Okay.
And my red ale that I have is Smithwick's.
That's probably the most Irish one, yeah.
Product of Ireland, right there on the can. So I'm excited. I've never had this before. I've had a few craft reds from the States, but this will be my first Smithwick's, so I'm excited for that. Doss, what do you have?
I have the El Rojo from, sorry.
Not Irish.
No, it's, where's the thing? Sorry, my hand is too big and too small at the same time. Griffin Claw El Rojo. It's red. It's very much from the U.S. So it's kind of the opposite of Irish. It's Hispanic somehow, and also from Michigan.
Which in fact are opposites.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I think as a native Michigander, yes, that believe it or not, that's what Michigan people are called, Michiganders. Even though I think most of our listeners are from here. Why am I saying that?
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like El Rojo is a weird name for a Michigan brewery to name.
Wrong edge of the country, as it were.
I'm sure most of the people that buy this are like, "What's El Rojo?" But anyway, all right. Tyler, do you have what do you have again?
This is I think my last defection from what I asked the two of you to drink, but I am drinking Shinerbach, a brown ale.
Gotcha.
It's close.
Is it really a brown?
It is close.
Yeah, it's a brown. So a little beer lesson. So as you get darker and darker, a red is going to be right in the middle, and then it's going to go from a red to an amber in terms of getting more sweet and more, I guess, sugary, caramely, and then it goes to brown, and then it goes to porter, and then it goes to stout. So that's kind of your progression there. And real craft beer heads. Oh, we don't talk about barley wine.
Oh, okay.
No, real beer heads, there's like a lot of different distinctions and micro things that make it different. But in general, when you're talking about a spectrum of beer, that's the way you go. Yeah, it's cool. We're living a lot on that amber and over side, which is fun.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we spent much time there. We spend a lot of time in IPA land on the show. We spend a lot
of time in IPA land and a lot of time in stout land, which are like your two sides.
Yeah.
Both bitter, but different bitter flavorness.
Mm.
Flavorness, there's a new one.
That's a good one. I think we'll keep
4, can you tell?
All right. So we've got our red ales. What about
the acquired taste?
Yeah.
Well, with what I'm drinking, the Shiner, when I moved to Texas, everyone was constantly drinking it all the time. And I knew that I was supposed to love it, and I just didn't, but it is definitely, which is not to say that it's bad. I was like, this isn't really my thing.
Yeah.
But you just I wasn't going to be in Texas and not drink Shiner. So at least with the company that I was surrounding myself with. So I think eventually I just came around to acceptance,
Gotcha.
as we all do with most things in life. And now I like it, and I'll even order it.
Wow.
But a lot of beer for me is very nostalgic. Like,
Yeah.
it's all
You
linked
mentioned
to
the Greenland is too.
the people that I had it with and the places that I had it, and probably why I was drinking it to forget. And like,
It is a lot of the time. But anyway, we don't need to go that deep. We're not in that mood like that. It's interesting that Shinerbach comes up. So you now have two parallels to our episode with Dr. Marcy Ray. Yes, this is the first of the two parallels. We'll get to the last one at the end. But yeah, she is from Texas. So Shinerbach was her childhood memory, I believe.
Okay. If I
yeah.
have anything in common with Dr. Ray, then I'm doing something right.
Right? Yes. Isn't that always the truth? Let's go to the song.
Let's do the song. All right. Pardon my French.
Oh God. That was horrible.
No, that was good, and it's staying.
Not even a dad, sir. You gotta.
I'm a dog dad. Okay, it counts. For the selection for this this segment, we have a piece from Olivier Messiaen. Did I pronounce that right?
Messiaen, yeah.
Messiaen.
Messiaen. Okay. It's called Turangalila-Symphony, and we're gonna be listening to the fifth movement, Joy du Sang des Étoiles. I think that was right. We're rolling with it. Correct my French if you'd like. I don't speak French. We're going to listen to that, and we'll be right back. So, we just listened to... I got to bring up the page again so I can read the whole thing. Turangalila-Symphony, Movement 5, Joy du Sang des Étoiles. I hope I pronounced that right. If I didn't, I'm sorry, French people. If it isn't abundantly obvious, that was the acquired taste. Tyler, kind of elaborate, if you need to, on what made that an acquired taste.
Yeah, sure. So I heard this piece, which is like over an hour long, and this is just one of 10 movements of the piece. I think when I was like 17, and it was definitely one of those things where I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't even begin to understand a little bit about this. But kind of going back to what I was talking about in an earlier episode, like that made me want to understand it. And so it's a piece that I've spent like a great deal of time around listening to. And one of my best friends, Evan Harger, he also heard Turangalila for the first time when he was in high school. So we've sort of like commiserated about, just like encountering it and trying to digest it and trying to understand it. And it also has like components of electronic and acoustic sound. I was talking a little bit about how there's this instrument, the Ons Martinu, which is kind of like a cross between a piano and a theremin, or an electric piano and a theremin. So you can play notes on a keyboard, and then your finger is attached to these two strings, and you can sort of do like a little vibrating motion with your finger, and it will oscillate the pitch of whatever note you're playing. That's a gross oversimplification. It's very interesting to watch people play it. And then your other hand is on a key, and that controls how loud the instrument is. So one instrument plays the key, or one hand plays the keyboard, and one plays the key that kind of affects the articulation of the instrument. So, very experimental and super out there. And I think the thing that I love about the piece is that I could have sat in a room for 50 years and I never would have been able to come up with that sound,
Wow, that's so true. Yeah.
And I think that that's amazing,
Yeah.
like that came out of somebody's brain. And so that's kind of the inspiring part about it. But of course, like at a first listen as a trained musician, I would not have a lot to grab onto. You really have to kind of sink your teeth into the music if you want to understand it and if you want to digest it and internalize it.
Yeah, I was telling you while we were listening, I've played one piece by Messiaen, and it was remind me with the name again. I just know it's about birds,
Exotic birds.
exotic
Yeah.
birds, and bird calls are not really based around notes necessarily, like musical instruments are built to be. Uh, so for the first probably 3 weeks of rehearsing it, it was just like, what are we doing? Why are we making these sounds? And eventually it starts to make sense. I think
Hmm.
this piece is going in a much different direction, but kind of holds the same ideal that you don't you're not going to know what you're hearing for a little while. And you mentioned this is only halfway through the piece,
Yeah.
this movement.
Yeah.
So
And ends with that huge, like massive point of arrival, and then you're only halfway there.
right, I think that probably is there so that people realize, okay, now you understand what I'm trying to say. Now here's the rest of it while you already are understanding that.
Yes.
So that's super cool. That's such an odd thing to think about as someone who is living in this day and age of music where pop music is so self-explanatory.
Mm.
Not just pop music, a lot of music is very self-explanatory. This you have to think about a little bit, not a little bit, quite a bit harder to realize, am I enjoying this? Why am I or why am I not enjoying this? And am I going to keep listening? I don't think people think about music to that extent very often.
You know, when I teach, when I was at Oklahoma State, a couple semesters, I taught an intro to music class for non-majors, and I always used to say, after we would listen to something like this, did you like it or did you not like it? And it's okay to say that you didn't like it. And you know, of course, invariably, like at least half the class, if not more than half the class, would say, no, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is a success for Messiaen, because as long as you had an opinion about it and the music elicited some sort of emotional response, that is the point of art, you know? And art doesn't have to elicit positive feelings, it just has to elicit feelings. And, you know, I think that that is something that's a little bit lost, like you're saying, with pop music, because like pop music is inherently designed to be appealing.
Hmm.
And I think that that just shows a very small sliver of what actual artistic expression is.
Hmm.
In fact, I don't think that you should leave every great piece of art feeling it, even just good, but particularly the same, you know, because
Yeah.
there are so many, there's such a broad range and spectrum of feeling, just like there's such a broad range and spectrum of pieces of art, you know, so we should have as many feelings as there are pieces of art.
Yeah.
But that's just kind of a, you know, a little soapbox thing for me.
Yeah.
For sure.
So I was just, I don't know if you just saw in frame, I was on my phone doing a little bit of research here because I was curious about when this was written, just historical context. So it looks like it was written in 1946 to 1948,
Mhm.
which history people will know that's kind of around the end of World War II.
Mhm.
But if you look at when this artist was kind of growing up, that would be before that, kind of post
Yeah.
World War One in
Mhm.
France. History people will know that that was not a very good time to be alive in Europe.
Yeah.
Um,
And actually, Messiaen himself was interred in a concentration camp during World War II.
mhm.
Wow.
He wrote one of his most famous pieces, the Quartet for the End of Time, in a concentration camp. So, very, very much a part of his entire identity. And I'm sure that all of his art is influenced by that experience.
Yeah. So if you guys want, if listeners want some more homework, if you look up like Dadaism in art, that I think falls along similar territory, albeit not the same. Um, that's just one of the things I remember a lot from European history around this time. And I think now that you might have a little bit more context, I would say give this piece a listen again. And maybe not just the fifth movement. Go from top to bottom. Give the whole, take an hour and a half. Just listen to it. Give it a shot and see what you might feel. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. When you have a little bit of context, like for someone like me who's like classically trained per se, like I did band and I like know how to read music and stuff, but not nearly to the extent that you two are. I'm in this kind of camp where I've got a foot in both camps. Like I know enough about classical music to be dangerous, but when it comes to something like this, I need more context. So it was cool to see that and kind of, okay, that explains where this is coming from. Now let me listen to that again, knowing that, and it'll help explain kind of more of the story. So very cool. I'm glad you shared this. This is really cool.
That's definitely part of music school, is learning how to quickly and efficiently dive into a piece or a song and be able to be like, this is what this person's saying. This is what I'm trying to say by performing it or by studying. Definitely a skill that everyone has to learn their own way.
Totally.
All right. Shall we go to ratings?
Yes, we shall. Keep it moving. So I've got the Smithwick's Red Ale from Ireland. And I got to say, this might be my favorite red ale. It basically just tastes like a slightly stronger amber. And I got to say, this tastes a lot like the Alaskan that I had earlier. But I think with the label of a red ale and expecting something a little bit deeper and richer, it really fits that bill very well. So for that reason, I'm going to go with a 4.0.
For the El Rojo, I'm sorry, it's so American. El Rojo. I'm happy with it. Red ales to me are just such a beery taste, if that makes sense. I think a lot of people associate that flavor with lager. I think lager is more pleasant to drink than the thought of beer. And that's not a bad thing. I still enjoy the flavor I get from the thought of beer, and to me, that's a red ale. Because of that, we're going 3.25.
Okay. Solid. For the Shiner Bock from Shiner, Texas, I would probably give it a 3. I will also go a 3.25. Solid.
Yeah.
Highly drinkable.
Yeah. But also definitely an acquired taste. So with that, we're going to rinse out our glasses, pour our next ones, and see you again next week for our last episode.